This is for educational use only. Our group is allowing our instructor, Mr. Roldan Ardinis, to use this as an educational material. This is Group 1, The Self from the Perspective from Various Philosophers.
Objectives. First objectives. Understanding the importance of the self. Second objective. Discuss the concept of the self from the philosophical perspective. Third objective. Differentiate the various concepts of the self and their similarities across time and place.
But first, we need to discuss about what is self. Self in the dictionary means the identity, character, or essential qualities of any person or a thing. The self is an individual as the object of the individual's own reflective consciousness. Some say that self is an eternal soul trapped inside the physical body. And some say it is a collection of thoughts of sensing events that formed thought and language that made self question itself. But for us, I know that you are you. I know that you are not me, and I know that you are not some other person who is not you. And I know that I am me because you tell me that I am. We each recognize others and ourselves as individuals, as different beings. I can own things and you can own things. I can even own ideas and you can offer me something I value if you want to use my thing or idea. To prove self is in reality, we need an audience, we need the others to verify ourselves. Not only ourselves, but themselves too. Now, here we are from the perspective from philosophers in Greek ancient. Dating back to ancient Greek inscriptions, the injunction to know thyself, it has encouraged people to engage in a search for self-understanding. Philosophy professor Mitchell Green discusses its history and relevance to the present. It means to know first and foremost one's own character, and it is important because only by knowing one's character can one be aware of one's limitation and avoid likening oneself to the gods. But more simply, it is only by knowing one's character that one can try and improve from a moral point of view or make the right decision in one's life. Know thyself, the philosophy of self-knowledge. Know thyself, find who you really are, and understand yourself. The first philosopher for ancient Greek is Socrates. Quote, know yourself. Socrates believed that the self exists in two parts. One part is in the physical, a tangible aspect of us. This is the part that is mortal and can be or is constantly changing. The second part is the soul, which he believed to be immortal. The soul is the part that is unwavering across all realms. Socrates believed that self is found in the soul and one must take care of it by doing right. Knowing what is right is, is doing what is right, meaning that once a person know oneself, they can have a good life.
Plato is the student of Socrates. Plato respected and supported his teachers and advisors. Plato's perspective in life is the ideal self is also the perfect self. Man is a dual nature of body and soul. And then Plato added three components of the soul, which is the rational soul, the spirited soul, and then the last one is the appetitive soul. When we say rational soul, It is the omniscient or all-knowing, or allowed us to become a thinker. The spirited soul. Contemplation allows man to regain perfections. When we contemplate, we use our emotions, feelings that we have inside, and then the appetitive soul. When we say appetitive soul, it is a basic needs or a self urge, like our desire to eat, to go out or something. When these three components is in perfectly sync, we attain we called happiness, a fruit of virtue. If this tree is not in sync, we are confused. We can think much more accurate. Plato's famous quote is, "The soul is immortal." Aristotle is the student of Plato. Aristotle's perspective in itself is, the soul makes a person a person. He believes that the body and soul is not separated. And then Aristotle further introduced that we have three different kinds of soul, which is the vegetative soul, sensitive soul, and then the rational soul. When we say vegetative soul, we can find this on plants. They're focusing on nutrition growth. And then the sensitive soul we can find in this in the animals, like cats, dogs, chicken. They have feelings, and that's why I don't hurt them. Rational soul. When we say rational soul, it is an intellectual intelligence that we can find in the human body, us. Um, Rational soul is like allowed us to be thinker. We can do opinions. We have thoughts in our mind, and his famous quote is, "Knowing yourself is the beginning of the wisdom." What if I ask you, what is your favorite color? What's your favorite movie? Your strength and your weaknesses? Who are you?
Medieval philosophy. The Middle Ages was the period in the European history from the collapse of the Roman civilization in the 5th century CE to the period of the Renaissance, variously interpreted as the beginning in the 13th, 14th, and 15th century, depending on the region of Europe and other factors. Medieval philosophers are the historical successors of the philosophers of antiquity, but they are in fact only tenuously connected with them.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, classmates. Now we will talk about Saint Augustine and his perspective about self. Saint Augustine, a Christian philosopher who dedicated his life and works to Christianity. He believed that self has an immortal soul, and the soul itself has its own vessel to live with, and that's the body. For he believes that the soul can't live without the body, because it is considered as a unity of body and self, and to put up, it composes an important element of man which defines self. He ultimately come to view the body as a spouse of the soul, that are both attached one another. He believes that the body is united with the soul so that man may be entire and complete. Humankind is created in the image and likeness of God. This is how he explained it. The soul can be immortal in communion with Christian God because knowing God is knowing self. And as we know, we are created in the image of God. And he explained that the image of God is created in our imagination, which which compose as our memories, like the way we remember things. So, as I go deeper in understanding the perspective of Saint Augustine about self, he let me understand the spiritual self that defines me, that to embrace ourselves no matter how we look or who we are, because the inner beauty will explain it all for who we really are. So we should take care of our body, not just physically but also mentally, for our body and soul defines ourselves.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, classmate. Now we will tackle about Antonio de Melo. Antonio de Melo was an Indian Jesuit priest, spiritual guide, and psychotherapist. He became famous for his books, lectures, and unique personality. While he was an awkward figure for many, he was inspiring one for others. In his books, such as Rediscovery of Life, which was his last work, he tells us that all people come into the world happy. However, little by little, people stop being aware of their potential by spending time in their personal cages, suffering. He believes that our own thoughts are our worst enemies. On the other hand, De Mello believed in the need to accept our spiritual nature. He accepted all religious belief. In particular, he felt comfortable in all of them and considered them his home. Therefore, his approach was often pantheistic, which was something that the Catholic Church didn't like. Antonio de Mello is one of the writers and who has sold the most books in spirituality. Their messages are an invitation to personal growth. However, they're also very inspiring and revolutionary.
Modern philosophy. Modern philosophy is a philosophy developed in the modern era and associated with modernity. It is not a specific doctrine or school, and thus should not be confused with modernism. Although there are certain acceptance common to much of it, which help to distinguish it from earlier philosophy. Rene Descartes quote, "I think, therefore I am." Rene Descartes' concept of the self revolves around the idea of mind-body dualism. For Descartes, a human person is composed of two parts, namely a material body and non-material mind. For Descartes, the mind or the soul is superior to the body, for it is in the mind that mental state occur. Descartes is convinced that he can be certain that he exists because if he doubts, there must be a thinking mind that does the doubting.
John Locke quote, "The self is the consciousness." John Locke believes that consciousness is the real self. He describes the personal identity as the accumulation of consciousness, informed through memories of experience. For instance, if time seems to change all of us, how you know that you is still you, and how can I know that I'm still me? To answer this one, we have Locke principle of individuation. The idea that a person keeps the same identity over time.
There is no such thing as self by David Hume. Hume argues that our concept of the self is a result of a natural habit of attributing unified existence to any collection of associated parts. This belief is a natural, but there is no logical to support for it. David Hume suggests that the self is just a bundle of perceptions, like links in the chain. To look for a unifying self beyond those perceptions is like looking for a chain apart from the links that, that constitute it. For Hume, the self is a set of experiences that are connected to one another and nothing more, but also nothing less. Hume doesn't deny that we have experiences, that those experiences are ours. He doesn't deny that we have personal identities. But he doesn't think that we can explain them by appealing to a substantial self.
Kant quote, "The greatest human quest is to know what." Kant argued that the awareness of different emotions that we have, impressions, and behavior is only part of ourself. He said that to fully understand who we are, there is a certain level of consciousness of sense. The idea of Kant about self, we can say that we are not only an object that perceives and reacts to whatever it is that we are experiencing. We also have the capabilities to understand beyond those experiences. Moreover, we are able to think and have a clear identification when we are and establish a sense of self that is unique and distinct from others.
To understand the mind, we must understand the brain. Therefore, the self is the brain, by Paul Churchland. He believed that to fully understand one's behavior, one should understand the different neurological movement of the brain that pertains to different emotions, feelings, actions, reactions, and how such brain movements affect the body. This leads to his idea of neurophilosophy. The self is inseparable from the brain and the physiology of the body. All we have is the brain, and so if the brain is gone, there's no self. And the physical brain, and not the imaginary mind, give us our sense of self.
Husserl's famous quote, "I have to philosophize, otherwise I could not live in this world." Husserl speaks about the self, the monad, as the experienced totality of one's life. Within it, we can abstractively distinguish constitutive levels, all the way down to the pre-ecological flow of time consciousness, quite unlike our ordinary experiences of ourselves. One way which we can be aware of ourselves is by regarding them reflectively, as in phenomenological reflection. Phenomenology is a philosophy of experience, meaning we reflect on our experiences. Ponte's famous quote, "The body is our general medium for having a world." Maurice Merleau-Ponty's phenomenological philosophy suggests the search for the self and consciousness need not to be focused on the space within our skulls. Instead, we should turn our attention to the life body. The life body for Merleau-Ponty extends from the edge of consciousness where we are aware of things to the world which those things are seen, felt, and heard.
Postmodernism. Postmodernism anthropology is based on the idea that humans are social construct or socially determined beings. We cannot have objective to access to reality because there is no neutral context from which to think. We have no individual personhood because we are the product of culture. The first postmodern self-conscious society is the fragmented situational image that result in emotional flatness of depthlessness.
Who called on mystery and the self?
The third volume of Foucault's History of Sexuality, Ressource Design, usually translated as the care of the self. The use of the term care to translate sase, however, sase also can be translated by worry and concern, as in having concern or worries about some matters. The care of the self, for its part, described the possibility of a mode of caring and concern for the self, contrasting it the present technologically approach to the self 26. Caring and concern for the self thereby introduced the notion of a fragile self, one in need of constant attention. And also, it can be used in any substance.
Eastern philosophy quotes that the mind is everything, what we think we become. Eastern philosophy is a diverse body of approaches to life and philosophizing, particularly centered on understanding the process of the universe and the endless becoming. Eastern philosophy believes that the self, composed of each person's personal identity, consciousness, and core philosophies, is an illusion. They deny the existence of the independent entity of self that Westerners posit does exist. Western philosophy is characterized by a canonical set of thinkers including Plato, Aristotle, Descartes, Kant, etc. It is also characterized by the influence of monotheistic religions, especially Christianity. Finally, Western philosophy has often reflected theories that emphasize formalism and universal concepts.
Who am I? Do you know yourself? For starter, when trying to pin down what makes who we are, we might consider a body, but in the truth, most of us don't really find our body to be the primary source, our senses of self. For example, is when you lost your entire limbs, or if your entire body is changed into a cyborg, you will still consider yourself to be you. Another example would be when two lovers ask each other what part of them do they like. Some say they like their eyes, their nose, their lips, their breasts, but the other party would not consider it as rich enough or the real you. And now, most of us primarily identify that our brain is our primary source of sense of self, but which part of our brains is ourself? Brain is a immensely complex organ, and some believe that we are part of our brain related to its taste and preference. But what would happen if certain parts of our brain is damaged or altered? Would you still be you? If yes, would you ever change that happen is a part of our life in general? We are constantly changing our tastes and preference. We develop lost abilities and skills across our lifetime. Would you still be you 10 years before and 10 years from now? Then, it seems we self is not our body or brain, constituents function, not our characteristics, not our memory, taste, and preference. Then, who or what are we? It is a common thing to say to be yourself in life. When we are aren't, it can be dissatisfying, like seeing someone being unconfident. We feel a sense of discomfort, distress, and unappealing nature to their company. Perhaps being yourself does not require knowing yourself in any ultimate sense. Perhaps it's not even being who who you are, not a matter of being consistent and doing things people expect you to be you. Rather, it is doing what you feel and honest embodiment of what you think and what right now. Being who you are is being what you become, and then being who you become over and over again, being yourself as a continual process of being someone else, nothing defined but a process of finding and being. Through history of humankind, we have struggled to pin down who that someone is because of ambiguous, unreachable nature of selfhood. All of these are just theories and perspective, and as the only person who experienced the self that is you, you are free to think of yourself in any way you like. Ultimately, processing this experience of selfhood is the most strange, deserting, and beautiful thing at the same time. Given the gift of front row, sit to the wonders of life that ultimately, at the end, kills its audience.